sono Andrea Bandini, faccio una breve presentazione e poi le lascio la parola. English. Good morning. We need more AI because the technology is not helping, but we need AI. So I'm Andrea Bandini. I'm a researcher from the National Research Council of Italy. I'm also the new president of the Italian Association for Artificial Intelligence, and this is my first public speech. So I'm very honored to be here and invited to introduce Professor Innerarity. And Professor Daniel Innerarity has several roles and is very active. He is a philosopher. He is chairing AI and democracy in the School of Transnational Governance in the European University in Florence. He is also professor of political and social philosophy at the University of Basque Country. He is the recipient of several awards. The last one is from the Spanish Ministry of Science, Innovation and University for the National Research for Human Sciences. And he is also a writer of several books about democracy and technology. And the last one is also on AI, in the connection between democracy, the people, and artificial intelligence. And I would mention a quote by Winston Churchill that was commenting the shape of the House of Commons in the UK, and he said, "We shape our buildings, and afterwards our building shape us." And so here we are now in front of a challenge. We have artificial intelligence technology that is helping us in shaping our environments, our choices, our decisions, but we need to choose the good ways for shaping our life, and the environment that we build will shape us. And I would leave the word to Professor Innerarity, and thanks for joining us despite the problems. And also, if you are willing to have questions at the end of the speech, we can have questions, otherwise we can skip the session of interaction and then remind to some offline interactions. So thanks for being here, and the floor is yours. Thanks. Deve condividere le slide?
Il professor Innerarity riesce a condividere le slide? Se ha una presentazione?
Forse non ci sente. Non lo sentiamo?
Ah no, il microfono è disattivato. Deve attivare il microfono.
Il microfono è disattivato.
Posso farlo senza la presentazione perché devo parlare solamente 30 minuti.
Perfetto. Può iniziare quando vuole.
Come?
Può iniziare.
Inizio?
Sì. Grazie.
Bene. Grazie mille per l'invito. Mi dispiace molto di non essere capace di parlare meglio né più a lungo di 30 minuti, ma una laringite contratta sulle ande questo Natale non me lo permette. Lo farò in 30 minuti un po' abbreviatamente. La mia idea è qual è il ruolo, lo spazio, la funzione della gente, del people nel sistema di intelligenza artificiale. Parlerò in inglese se volete. Democracy is a form that gives power to the people. This self-government has taken various forms through history, and depending on the issues at stake. According to Lincoln's famous formula, democracy is a system of government in which the people are present as the author, subject, and recipient of political action. Well, what we need right now is a Gettysburg Address for democracy in the age of artificial intelligence. What I am now proposing you in a few minutes maybe some elements for such a new discourse. The initial problem is that there seems to be a growing incompatibility between sophisticated technology and human authorship. If democracy is Kratos of the demos, it is not very clear to what extent it is democratic to delegate our decisions to technology. All technologies have resulted in a certain peripheralization of humans from the decision-making sphere. That's ultimately automation, but none has been as disruptive as artificial intelligence. None has made us so indispensable, so replaceable. The general trend towards automatic piloting of human affairs is not only a quantitative increase of the instruments at our disposal, but qualitative transformation of our being in the world. Our world in the center of which we no longer find ourselves. This new technopolitical landscape is both very important for human beings and at the same time depopulated by humans, full of places and procedures that are forbidden to pass through and to be present, without this necessarily having a negative connotation. It is a dehumanized world, as evidenced by the fact that the world's most significant architectures are devoid of people. Automatic doors, lifts without users, robotic agricultural fields, autonomous communication networks, extraterrestrial orbital stationary bases, deserted of humans. Well, before thinking about remedies to this threat, we need to know if it is real. To begin with, we must recognize the large amount of human labor embedded in automation itself. The work persists. Even jobs that are at high risk of automation have a significant set of tasks and functions that are difficult to automate. A new global division of digital labor is taking place, forming chains of offshoring that force us to look at automation differently. Human workers are not replaced by robots, but by other hidden, precarious, and lower paid human workers. Contrary to certain dominant rhetoric, the platforms are not driven by benevolent users, but by proletarians of the clique. What we have is micro workers or ghost workers hidden in the technologies underpinning artificial intelligence and performing repetitive digital tasks. As Nick Silver words, if you can see a human in the loop, just look for a bigger loop. The question is therefore not how many humans are in the loop, but how, where, and in what way should humans be in order to have the best human-machine ecosystem and fulfill the democratic promises of human self-government. You can think of the process of automation by analogy with the way we have designed representative democracy, so that without being fully present, all of us at all moments of government, it would allow us to consider ourselves as to consider ourselves as the ultimate authors of collective decisions. Humans should be there by virtue of the properties of these devices, flexibility, interoperability, malleability, contestability, community, diversity, and desirability. This has all different declinations of the will, which assert different aspects of the subjectivity of the people. The people who emerge as subjects in the digital age would be a we made of the conscious, the interpreters, the interveners, the contesters, all of us in our diversity and the ultimate decision makings. First of all, reflexivity. All technology, and perhaps more so digital technology, provokes reflexive responses in us rather than reflexivity. Reflexive rather than reflexivity. Technology works without requiring or even allowing us to adopt an explicit relationship with it. Technologies in general and ubiquitous computing in particular are integrated into the social fabric until they become indistinguishable from it, generating a kind of digital unconscious. These are variations of Langdon Winner's famous idea of technological sleepwalking, a lack of awareness of technological development and its consequences, unquestioned, functional, and neutral. It is not that key decisions are delegated to machines, in which there is no human. It is rather that we are pressured to make decisions in such a way that we don't ask ourselves who the real author is. Automated systems push us into thoughtlessness in the sense described by Hannah Arendt, the inability to criticize institutions, the lack of reflection on consequences, the willingness to believe that orders are correct. My conclusion for this point is, for artificial intelligence to be compatible with our democratic authorship, we must first introduce reflexivity in the different phases of the process without ruining the advantages of automation. My second point, interpretability. We are the interpreters of the issue. Data analytics has developed so dramatically that it can seduce us with the idea that it is an accurate representation of the world, capable of also accurately reflecting what the people really are. However, an examination of its nature reveals a number of problems with the promise of data as the new accurate representation of the world. In the supposedly agnostic data loop, there are also many humans. Data are contingent, contextual, dependent, and largely arbitrary constructs, human constructs. This arbitrariness is not something that could be eliminated with more data, but if anything, with better interpretations. Quantity does not allow us to completely get rid of the question of the quality of the data, its context, scope, and limitations. Accumulation does not solve the problems of interpretation. The problem with current data science is that it is often underpinned by methods that rely on simple epistemologies that ignore the complex and contextual nature of humans and their interactions, that do not critically interrogate the assumptions of knowledge. It is curious that the crisis of political representation, which has been invoked by many protests in recent years, they don't represent us, has given way to an uncritical acceptance of the capacity of data to represent us. Did our political representatives not represent us, but our data does? If the if the political mandate of representation is questioned, monitored, and revoked, the claim to represent through data what we really are and what want should be accompanied by a reflection on the fulfillment of this promise, its epistemic limits, and its political and economic conditioning factors. It is necessary to reclaim their need or the right to interpret them. We are not the but those who interpret them. Next point, malleability. We the interveners. What I call here malleability, rather than a normative principle, is a matter of fact. The social transformations set in motion by artificial intelligence are not predetermined by these technologies, but emerge from the ways in which these technologies and the practices that develop around them are culturally understood, socially organized, and legally regulated. Hence, both the utopia that thinks that technology solves everything and the dystopia that sees in it all dangers have a profoundly historical vision that places power only in technology and not in the way we humans appropriate it. Neutralism and determinism conceive technology independently of its social use as something closed, defined, and not susceptible to modulation. In the first case, because it is not necessary, and in the second, because it is not possible. Thinking in this way prevents us from perceiving the spaces for democratic configuration that we have at our disposal, which are not unlimited, but neither are they non-existent. The ideology of inevitabilism mentioned by Susanna Zuboff ignores the fact that all technologies allow for some choices, even if the scope of possibilities is not infinite. The question could be posed as follows. What kind of human intervention can be carried out in machine learning to make it machine but still be learning? How does the human will to configure articulate with the possibilities of complexity reduction that are only available to automated algorithms? The difficulty of the matter is that algorithms can only be problematized up to a certain point. Why? Because automation cannot be constantly manualized without losing its virtualities. We who intervene in the development of technology do so out of a sovereign will that does not want to renounce the benefits that artificial intelligence can bring us. Another point, contestability. We humans are the challengers. Sorry. The fact that more and more public decisions are made by algorithmic procedures forces us to renegotiate the hybrid space of action in which we humans and technological artifacts operate. There will be no true democracy if we don't bring these artifacts into the realm that allows us to contest their decisions. The possibilities of contestation can take different forms: monitoring, evaluation, supervision, critique, accountability, and take place at different moments in data, algorithms, results, regulation. People, this is my conclusion to this point, people not only obey, but resist, subvert, and transgress the work of algorithms, redeveloping them from objectives that do not coincide with those for which they were designed. Let's consider the case of transparency. Let us not forget that transparency requirements aim to enable contestability. The value of regulating the transparency of artificial intelligence is to generate knowledge and debate about the technology, to motivate individuals to challenge decisions based on it, and in the long run, to reinforce social acceptance of the new technology. As in democracy in general, by contexting algorithmic decisions, we who context do not ruin the technology, but rather contribute to increase its legitimacy. Another point is community. We all. People's control over the technological decisions that affect them is often thought of as an individual attribute, an informed consent that is rarely within our reach, individual reach, due to the complexity of the issues, ignorance of the overburdening that often results. The fundamental problem with when we talk about consenting or not is that the task of auditing algorithms or explaining automatic decisions has to be conceived as a collective task, not as a mere individual right, often difficult to realize. It is not enough to privatize transparency and leave the control over algorithms in the hands of citizens. Citizens in the individual sense of the term, a control they personally can hardly carry out, and thus renounce public regulation. Trust generation is essential when dealing with complex environments. The inspection of algorithms should generally be left to some trusted auditor. Information fiduciaries or intermediaries are needed, institutions that delegate, interpret, represent, and defend us in complex scenarios, taking into account the information asymmetry in which we individual subjects find ourselves, our lack of time or expertise. Only the institutionalization of auditing and control control procedures can ensure that nothing is done at anyone's expense, that the asymmetries that may be generated are corrected as far as possible, that we are all there. What if, instead of aiming for a human in the loop, understood as an individual who consents, we try to keep society in the loop, keeping society in the loop. Another point is diversity. If representative democracies, there has been great progress in recent years to make them truly representative, which implies, among other things, that the diversity of the representatives should be as similar as possible to the diversity of the represented. What would be an analogous strategy today to be able to consider such a powerful technology democratic, as democratic? the democratization of this technology involves, as has always been the case when an authority of any kind in the history has been configured, their insertion in spaces where the pluralism inherent to societies is articulated. In its current configuration, our digital environment poses many problems of lack of diversity that would require ensuring pluralism. We have, for instance, a diversity problem arising from the concentration of power exercised by a few platforms. There is a lack of diversity in machine learning systems. There is a whole discussion about how to achieve greater diversity in computer science itself, a discipline overly dependent on engineering and with a stereotypical model of masculinity. There is also a problem of value balance in the construction and curation of data sets. The lack of facial diversity has led to known problems of discrimination in facial recognition that do not sufficiently take into account local and global differences. There is a lack of diversity in news recommendations, etc., etc. In order for our algorithms to represent us, they need to reflect our diversity, because the us that holds sovereignty is constituted by those who are different. It is an us made from their diversity. And finally, what I like to call decidability. We, deciders, those who make finally the decisions. Thus, sorry. Does it still make sense to defend the right to a human decision? A right to a human decision when we move in an automatic environment, and even more so when decision seems to fall almost entirely to algorithms. Machines and humans decide in a very different way. We are particularly gifted for one type of situation and very clumsy in others. Algorithms have a role to play when the criteria, this would be my final conclusion, when criteria are well defined and quantifiable, subject to strict rules. On the contrary, humans have, comparatively speaking, a great capacity to solve what may be called wild problems. I am quoting Roberts. Wild problems. We are better equipped to handle poorly or not very well structured problems. That humans decide relatively well with little information, for example, is because through history we have had to survive in low information environments along the evolution. To answer the question of how to make artificial intelligence and democracy compatible, I propose to distinguish which types of problems, of which part of the problems are more solvable by one or the other intelligence, and to design the human-machine ecosystem according to this distinction. And we have to know that humans will be indispensable wherever there are issues that cannot be solved by a flow of information and knowledge. There are political decisions there is democratic sovereignty where, despite all the sophistication of calculations, we are finally forced to make a decision that is neither preceded by overwhelming reasons nor driven by infallible technologies. Algorithmic procedures serve to reduce complexity, but they do not seem likely to eliminate absolutely the uncertainty in which a good part of political decisions are taken, thus disappointing their promises of objectivity to the relief of those who feared the end of political pluralism. Thank you very much, grazie mille per la vostra attenzione, scusatemi per la mia voce oggi non molto fine. Grazie mille.
Thanks a lot. So the very interesting speech full of